Millionaire adopted a homeless girl, now with a family. She writes happy diaries. Before we get into it, if this video found you at the right moment, let me know with your favorite emoji. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Madison mansion as 40-year-old Robert Madison adjusted his silk tie, his weathered hands trembling slightly. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day that would change 3 lives forever. "She's here, Mr. Madison," announced Mrs. Chen, the social worker, her voice barely containing her own emotion. Behind her stood a small figure clutching a worn teddy bear, blonde hair catching the light like spun gold. 7-year-old Emma Rose looked up at Robert with eyes that had seen too much sadness for someone so young. Her previous foster homes had failed her, but Robert saw something in those blue eyes that reminded him of his own difficult childhood, a spark that refused to be extinguished. "Hello, Emma," Robert said, crouching down to her level. "I'm Robert, and this," he gestured toward the elegant woman approaching from the living room, "is Sarah, my wife." 27-year-old Sarah Madison moved gracefully across the marble floor, her warm smile instantly putting Emma at ease. After 3 years of marriage, she and Robert had struggled to conceive, leading them down the path of adoption, a journey that had tested their relationship but ultimately strengthened their resolve to build a family. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside her husband. Emma's grip on her teddy bear loosened slightly as she took in the grand staircase, the crystal chandelier, and most importantly, the genuine love radiating from these 2 strangers who wanted to be her parents. The paperwork was signed, the legalities completed, but the real work, building a family, was just beginning. As Mrs. Chen drove away, Emma stood in the foyer of her new home, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this moment. For the first time in her short life, she wasn't temporary. That evening, Sarah helped Emma unpack her few belongings in a room that had been lovingly prepared with pink walls, a canopy bed, and shelves ready to be filled with new memories. As Emma explored her new space, she discovered something special on the antique writing desk, a beautiful leather-bound journal with her name embossed in gold letters. "Every little girl should have a place to write her thoughts," Sarah explained, sitting on the edge of Emma's new bed. "Your thoughts, your dreams, your daily adventures, they all matter now." Emma opened to the first blank page, her small fingers tracing the smooth paper. This journal would become her confidant, her witness to the transformation from lost little girl to beloved daughter. As she drifted off to sleep in her new room, she couldn't know that the next 3 months would be filled with challenges, adjustments, and the slow, beautiful process of learning to trust again. But tomorrow would bring new possibilities, and for the first time in years, Emma Rose Madison, she loved the sound of her new name, fell asleep with hope blooming in her heart like the roses in Sarah's garden. 3 months had passed like a gentle dream, and Emma had settled into the rhythm of the Madison household with surprising ease. The nightmares that once plagued her sleep had faded, replaced by the security of knowing that when she woke up, Robert and Sarah would still be there. This particular September morning carried the crisp promise of autumn as Robert helped Emma into his luxury sedan. Today marked a milestone neither of them had anticipated with such nervous excitement. Emma's first day at Riverside Elementary, one of the most prestigious private schools in their Connecticut neighborhood. "Are you ready for this adventure, princess?" Robert asked, adjusting the rearview mirror to catch her reflection. Emma sat in her new school uniform, a navy blue jumper with a crisp white blouse, looking every inch the proper young lady, though her blonde hair still carried that endearing wildness that Sarah hadn't quite tamed. "I think so, Daddy," Emma replied, the word "daddy" still new and precious on her tongue. She clutched her new backpack, filled with supplies that Sarah had meticulously organized the night before. Inside was her special journal, which had become her most treasured possession. As they pulled into the circular drive of Riverside Elementary, Emma marveled at the brick building with its ivy-covered walls and manicured gardens. Children her age walked hand in hand with their parents, and for a moment Emma felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Would she fit in? Would the other children accept her? "Remember what we talked about," Robert said gently, sensing her hesitation. "You're smart, you're kind, and you're exactly where you belong. Sarah and I believe in you completely." The morning went better than Emma had dared hope. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was a kind woman with silver hair and twinkling eyes who immediately made Emma feel welcome. During recess, she met Jessica, a girl with pigtails who shared her love of drawing, and Marcus, a boy who knew everything about butterflies. But it was during lunch, sitting in the cafeteria with her new friends, that Emma felt the full weight of her transformation hit her. As Jessica talked about her family's weekend plans and Marcus mentioned his little sister, Emma realized she finally had stories to share too. "My mum packed me this lunch," Emma said proudly, unwrapping the sandwich Sarah had made with extra love. "And my dad is picking me up after school to take me for ice cream." The words felt foreign and wonderful in her mouth. My mom, my dad. For 7 years, she had existed in a space between families, never quite belonging anywhere. Now she had her own place at the Madison dinner table, her own room filled with her own belongings, and parents who asked about her day and meant it. That afternoon, as promised, Robert was waiting in the pickup line, his face lighting up when he saw her emerge from the building. Emma ran to the car with more energy than she'd had in months, bursting with stories about her teacher, her new friends, and the art project they'd started. "Sarah's going to want to hear every detail," Robert said, his heart swelling with a pride he'd never experienced before. This little girl had brought a joy to his life that all his business success had never provided. As they drove home through the tree-lined streets of their neighborhood, Emma pressed her face to the window, watching other children playing in their yards. Soon, she would be one of them. Not the foster child passing through, but Emma Madison, a girl with a permanent address and parents who would attend every school play and soccer game. That evening, after dinner and homework help from Sarah, Emma sat at her desk with her journal open before her. The blank page seemed to shimmer with possibility as she uncapped her favorite purple pen and began to write about her perfect day. "Dear Diary," Emma wrote in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Today was my first day at Riverside Elementary, and I think it might be the best day of my whole life." The desk lamp cast a warm circle of light over her journal as Emma carefully formed each letter, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Through her window, she could see Sarah tending to the rose garden that had become Emma's favorite spot in their expansive backyard. "Mrs. Patterson is my teacher, and she has the nicest smile. When she introduced me to the class, she said I was their new friend Emma Madison. I liked how that sounded, like I really belonged there. Jessica sits next to me, and she let me borrow her green crayon when mine broke. Marcus knows everything about monarch butterflies, and he says he'll show me the cocoon in his backyard." Emma paused in her writing, savoring the memory of lunch period when she'd finally felt like one of the kids instead of the odd one out. She'd been so worried that somehow everyone would know she was adopted, that they'd see her differently. But sitting there with Jessica and Marcus, laughing about Marcus's silly butterfly facts, she'd felt completely normal. The cafeteria is really big and kind of scary at first, but Jessica saved me a seat. I told them about Mom's special sandwiches and how Dad promised ice cream after school. It felt so good to say my mom and my dad like all the other kids do. Downstairs, Emma could hear the familiar sounds of her new family's evening routine, Sarah loading the dishwasher, Robert reading the financial news in his study, the gentle classical music that always played during dinner cleanup. These sounds had become her lullaby, the soundtrack to her newfound security. Dad kept his promise about ice cream. We went to Sweetie's parlor, and I got double chocolate chip. He asked me about every single thing that happened today and listened to all my stories. He even laughed when I told him about how Marcus tried to eat his sandwich like a butterfly drinking nectar. Emma smiled at the memory. Robert had been so patient with her constant chatter during their ice cream date, asking follow-up questions and showing genuine interest in the details that mattered to a 7-year-old. She'd never had an adult listen to her so intently before. When we got home, Mum was waiting with a snack and wanted to hear everything all over again. She asked if I made friends, and when I told her about Jessica and Marcus, she got that happy look in her eyes, like when she watches her roses bloom. She said maybe we could invite them over for a play date soon. The word play date still felt magical to Emma. In her previous placements, she'd rarely been allowed to have friends over, and she'd certainly never had parents excited to meet them. The idea of bringing Jessica and Marcus to her beautiful room, showing them her journal and her collection of books, filled her with anticipation. I love my new school uniform. Mum helped me lay it out for tomorrow, and she braided my hair in a special way that Jessica said looked really pretty. She taught me how to do it myself, so I can look nice every day. Emma touched her blonde hair, still feeling the remnants of Sarah's gentle hands working through the strands. These small acts of care, the hair braiding, the carefully packed lunches, the bedtime stories, had slowly healed something broken inside her that she hadn't even realized needed fixing. Tomorrow we're going to start our art project. Mrs. Patterson said we can draw anything that makes us happy. I already know what I'm going to draw. Our house with the rose garden, and me and Mom and Dad standing in front of it, holding hands like a real family. The words real family made Emma pause. She erased them and wrote, like our family instead. Because that's what they were now, not pretend, not temporary, not conditional. They were her family, as real as any family could be. I'm getting sleepy now, but I wanted to write down everything so I won't forget. I never want to forget how it feels to have a place where I belong. Emma closed her journal and prepared for bed, her heart full of contentment she'd never experienced before. Tomorrow would bring another day of school, more time with her new friends, and another evening of this perfect routine with her parents. As she drifted off to sleep, Emma's last conscious thought was a simple prayer of gratitude for the family that had chosen her and the new life that was unfolding one perfect day at a time. October arrived with a burst of golden leaves and crisp mornings that made Emma want to skip all the way to school. She had been a Madison for 4 months now, and the transformation was remarkable, not just in her circumstances, but in her entire demeanor. The quiet, wary child who had first walked through their door had blossomed into a confident, joyful little girl who attacked each day with enthusiasm. Dear Diary, she wrote on a Thursday evening, her penmanship noticeably improved from weeks of practice. Today was picture day at school, and I felt so beautiful in the dress Mom picked out for me. It's blue like my eyes and has tiny white flowers on it. Mrs. Patterson said I looked like a princess. Emma had spent extra time that morning with Sarah, who had carefully curled her blonde hair and added a matching blue ribbon. Standing in front of her bedroom mirror, Emma had barely recognized the polished little girl looking back at her. This was the child she was meant to be, loved, cared for, confident in her place in the world. Jessica and I are best friends now. We sit together at lunch every day, and she's teaching me how to French braid during recess. Her mom called our mom yesterday to set up a sleepover at our house next weekend. I can't believe I'm going to have a real sleepover party. The friendship with Jessica had developed naturally over the past month, built on shared interests in art and books, and sustained by both girls' gentle natures. Emma treasured having a friend who didn't know about her past, who saw her simply as Emma Madison, the girl with the pretty house and the nice parents. Marcus brought his butterfly book to school again and showed me the pictures of monarchs migrating to Mexico. He says they fly thousands of miles just to get home. I told him I understand how they feel. Sometimes you have to travel a long way to find where you belong. Emma's insight had impressed Mrs. Patterson, who had overheard the conversation. At parent-teacher conferences the previous week, she had told Robert and Sarah that Emma showed remarkable emotional maturity for her age, along with above-average academic potential. After school, Dad took me to the park, like he does every Thursday. We fed the ducks, and he pushed me on the swings really high, so high I felt like I was flying. Then we sat on our special bench, and he asked me about my day. He always wants to know everything, even the small stuff like what I had for lunch and what books we read in class. These Thursday afternoon outings had become sacred time for Emma and Robert. Initially suggested by their family counselor as a way to strengthen their father-daughter bond, the park visits had evolved into Emma's favorite part of the week. It was during these conversations that she felt most connected to her new father, most secure in his love for her. Tonight, Mom helped me with my math homework. I'm getting really good at addition and subtraction. She's so patient when I don't understand something right away. She never makes me feel dumb like some of my old foster parents did. Instead, she finds new ways to explain things until it clicks. Sarah's nurturing approach to Emma's education had been transformative. Where Emma had once struggled academically due to inconsistent schooling and emotional trauma, she now thrived under Sarah's patient guidance and consistent support. Her grades had improved dramatically, but more importantly, she had developed a love of learning. I love our bedtime routine. After homework and dinner, we all watch TV together in the family room. Dad sits in his big chair, Mum curls up on the couch, and I get to snuggle with whichever one I want. Then Mom reads me a story and tucks me in, and Dad always stops by to say goodnight and check if I need anything. This nightly ritual had been crucial in helping Emma feel secure and loved. The consistency of it, knowing that no matter what happened during the day, she would end it surrounded by love and care, had gradually erased the anxiety that had plagued her sleep for years. Sometimes I lie in bed and think about my life before Mom and Dad found me. It seems like it happened to a different little girl, that Emma was scared and sad and never knew what was going to happen next. This Emma, the real Emma, knows exactly where she belongs. Emma closed her journal and prepared for bed, listening to the familiar sounds of her family settling in for the night. Sarah was running a bath, Robert was locking up the house, and soon they would both come to say goodnight, just like they did every single night. As she brushed her teeth and changed into her favorite pajamas, pink ones with unicorns that Sarah had bought especially for her, Emma reflected on how completely her world had changed. She was no longer a child in the system, moving from placement to placement. She was Emma Madison, beloved daughter, cherished family member, and for the first time in her life, she knew with absolute certainty that this was forever. November brought the first real cold snap of the season, and with it, Emma's excitement about her first Thanksgiving as a Madison. She had been with her new family for 5 months now, and the approaching holiday filled her with anticipation she'd never experienced before. "Dear Diary," Emma wrote on a Sunday evening, sitting cross-legged on her bed in her favorite flannel pajamas. "Mom and Dad have been planning our Thanksgiving dinner, and they keep asking what foods I want. I can't believe they want to know what I like. In my old places, I just ate whatever was put in front of me and was grateful for that." Sarah had spent the weekend showing Emma old photo albums from previous Thanksgiving celebrations, explaining family traditions that would now include Emma. The idea of having traditions, of being part of something bigger than herself, thrilled Emma beyond measure. Dad's sister, Aunt Rebecca, is coming with her husband, Uncle Tom, and their twins, Jake and Lily. They're my age, and Mum says they're excited to meet their new cousin. I've never been anyone's cousin before. I keep practicing saying my cousins in the mirror because it sounds so wonderful. Emma had been nervous about meeting Robert's extended family, worried they might see her as an outsider or somehow less legitimate than a biological child. But Robert had assured her that family was about love, not blood, and that she was as much a Madison as any of them. "School is getting more fun every day. Mrs. Patterson started our unit on family trees and asked everyone to draw theirs. At first I was worried because my tree would look different, but when I drew Mom and Dad at the top and me underneath, it looked just as beautiful as everyone else's." The family tree project had been a milestone for Emma. Instead of feeling ashamed or different, she had proudly presented her tree to the class, explaining how some families are formed through birth and others through choice, but all are equally real and valid. Jessica's sleepover was the best night ever. We stayed up until almost midnight, making friendship bracelets and talking about everything. She taught me how to braid lanyard keychains, and I showed her my butterfly book that Marcus lent me. When she met Mom and Dad, she whispered to me that they seem so happy and that I'm lucky to have such nice parents. The validation from Jessica had meant more to Emma than the child could articulate. Having her friend observe and approve of her family had somehow made it feel more real, more permanent. Jessica's mother had also commented to Sarah about how well-adjusted and happy Emma seemed, which had filled Sarah with pride. We're learning cursive writing at school now, and Mrs. Patterson says I have very neat handwriting. I love practicing writing my name, Emma Rose Madison, over and over. Each time I write it, it feels more real, more mine. Mom said she and Dad chose Rose for my middle name because roses are beautiful and strong, just like me. Emma had been deeply moved when Sarah and Robert explained the significance of her middle name. The connection to Sarah's beloved rose garden made Emma feel even more woven into the fabric of the Madison family story. Yesterday, Dad took me to his office for Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. All his employees knew about me and were so nice. His secretary, Mrs. Williams, had a whole drawer of coloring books just for when I visit. Dad showed me off to everyone, and I could tell he was proud to be my father. The visit to Robert's investment firm had been eye-opening for Emma. Seeing how respected her father was, how kind his employees were to her, and how proudly he introduced her, had filled her with a sense of importance and belonging she'd never experienced. I'm getting really good at helping Mom in the kitchen. She's teaching me how to measure ingredients and crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. She says cooking is one of the ways we take care of the people we love, and that someday I'll cook for my own family. I like thinking about having my own family someday, but for now, I just want to stay little and be Mom and Dad's daughter forever. These quiet moments in the kitchen with Sarah had become some of Emma's most treasured times. The gentle instruction, the shared laughter when something went wrong, the pride in Emma's face when a recipe turned out perfectly. These were the building blocks of the mother-daughter relationship Emma had always longed for. Tomorrow is Monday, and I have my first parent-teacher conference where Mom and Dad will both come to hear about how I'm doing in school. Mrs. Patterson told me she has very good things to say about my progress. I can't wait for Mom and Dad to hear how well I'm doing and to be proud of me. Emma closed her journal and prepared for bed, her heart full of anticipation for the week ahead. The parent-teacher conference, continued preparations for Thanksgiving, and the daily rhythm of her new life all stretched before her like a beautiful path leading toward a future she no longer feared. As Sarah came in to read her bedtime story and Robert stopped by for his goodnight kiss, Emma reflected on how completely her world had transformed. She was no longer the frightened, uncertain child who had arrived at the Madison house 6 months ago. She was their daughter, fully and completely, and tomorrow would bring another day of the life she had always dreamed of living. December arrived with Emma's first snow day as a Madison, and the magic of watching the world transform outside her bedroom window filled her with pure wonder. She had been part of the Madison family for 6 months now, and every day still brought new experiences that reminded her how different her life had become. Dear Diary. Emma wrote that evening, curled up in the window seat of her room with a cup of hot chocolate Sarah had made especially for her. Today was a snow day, and we didn't have school. Mom and Dad both stayed home from work, and we spent the whole day together as a family. I built my first snowman ever, and Dad helped me make it really tall. The spontaneous family day had been magical. Robert had called into his office to say he wouldn't be coming in. Sarah had cancelled her volunteer commitments, and they had dedicated the entire day to Emma's first real snow experience. The resulting snowman, complete with Sarah's old scarf and Robert's baseball cap, stood proudly in their front yard like a monument to Emma's childhood joy. We went sledding at Miller's Hill with lots of other families from the neighborhood. I was scared at first because the hill looked so steep, but Dad went down with me the first few times, and then I was brave enough to go by myself. Mom took pictures of everything and said we'll put them in my special photo album. Emma's photo album had been growing steadily since her arrival. Sarah had started it as a way to document Emma's new life, and it had become one of Emma's most prized possessions. Each photo represented another milestone, another memory, another piece of evidence that she truly belonged in this family. At lunch today, I realized something important. When Mom was making grilled cheese sandwiches and Dad was building up the fire in the fireplace, I wasn't thinking about my old life at all. I wasn't comparing this family to my foster families or wondering if it was too good to be true. I was just being happy right in that moment, like any other kid would be. This realization had been profound for Emma, though she couldn't fully articulate its significance. The absence of her usual anxiety and hypervigilance marked a major psychological breakthrough. She was finally beginning to trust that her happiness was permanent. Mrs. Patterson gave me a special award at school last week for Most Improved Student. Mom and Dad both came to the ceremony, and I saw Mom crying happy tears when I walked across the stage. Afterwards, Dad took us all out for ice cream sundaes to celebrate. He kept telling everyone we met that I was his daughter and how proud he was of me. The academic recognition had been particularly meaningful for Emma, who had struggled in her previous schools due to the instability in her home life. Her transformation from a struggling, anxious student to an engaged, confident learner reflected the security she now felt in all areas of her life. We started planning Christmas today, and I get to help choose the tree. Mom showed me pictures of all their past Christmas mornings, and now I get to be in the pictures too. She said Santa will know exactly where to find me this year because I finally have a real home address. The approaching Christmas held special significance for Emma. In foster care, holidays had often been difficult reminders of what she lacked. Now, for the first time, she would experience Christmas as a truly wanted and loved child, with parents who delighted in making the season magical for her. Jessica invited me to her birthday party next weekend, and Mom is taking me shopping for a present. I love that I get to be a normal kid who goes to birthday parties and has friends and doesn't have to worry about whether my family will still be here tomorrow. Emma's growing social confidence reflected her increasing emotional security. She no longer held herself apart from other children, wondering if she would be there long enough for friendships to matter. She now invested fully in her relationships, secure in the knowledge that her foundation was solid. Tonight, after dinner, we all snuggled on the couch to watch a Christmas movie. I was lying between Mom and Dad, and suddenly I felt so safe and loved that I almost cried, but they were happy tears, like Mom's at my award ceremony. I whispered, "I love you," to both of them, and they said it back, and I knew they really meant it. This spontaneous expression of love had been a milestone for Emma, who had been cautious about being too vulnerable with her emotions. The natural way the words had flowed, and the immediate, heartfelt response from both parents had sealed something important in her heart. 6 months ago, I was just Emma, the foster kid who didn't belong anywhere. Now I'm Emma Rose Madison, and I belong exactly where I am. I have a family who chose me, a school where I'm succeeding, friends who like me for who I am, and a future that looks bright and beautiful. Emma closed her journal and prepared for bed, listening to the familiar sounds of her family's evening routine. The snow continued to fall softly outside her window, blanketing the world in pristine white and promising more winter adventures in the days to come. As Sarah came in for their nightly story time and Robert made his rounds to ensure all was well, Emma reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She was no longer the lost little girl who had entered the Madison home 6 months ago. She was their daughter completely and forever, and her story was just beginning. But what Emma didn't know was that a phone call would come tomorrow that would test everything she had come to believe about her perfect new life, forcing her to confront a truth that would either strengthen her family bonds or shatter them entirely. The phone rang at exactly 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. Emma was upstairs getting ready for school, carefully braiding her hair the way Sarah had taught her, humming a song she'd learned in music class. She didn't hear the urgent conversation happening in Robert's study below. "Mr. Madison, this is Detective Patricia Reynolds with the Connecticut State Police. We need to discuss your daughter Emma's case. New information has come to light regarding her biological family." Robert's blood ran cold. Emma had been with them for 7 months now, and the adoption had been finalized just last week. They had been assured that Emma's biological parents' rights had been permanently terminated due to severe neglect and abandonment. "I don't understand," Robert said, gripping the phone tighter. "Emma's adoption is final. Her biological parents signed away their rights years ago. Mr. Madison, Emma's biological grandmother, Margaret Rose Thompson, has come forward. She's been searching for Emma for 3 years. She claims she never knew Emma was in the system. The biological parents apparently hid Emma's existence from the extended family. Mrs. Thompson is requesting visitation rights and considering a custody challenge." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. He thought of Emma upstairs, innocently preparing for another day at the school she loved, in the life they had carefully built together. How could he possibly explain that her perfect world might be threatened? "Detective Reynolds, Emma has been through enough trauma. She's finally stable, happy, thriving. Surely the courts wouldn't consider disrupting her life now. Mrs. Thompson is 71 years old, financially stable, and has hired an excellent attorney. She's claiming that blood relatives should have been contacted before the child was placed for adoption. She's not necessarily seeking full custody, but she wants to be part of Emma's life." Robert ended the call and sat in stunned silence. Through his office window, he could see Sarah's rose garden, where Emma spent hours reading and drawing. Every flower, every carefully tended plant, represented the love they had poured into creating a perfect environment for their daughter. When Sarah entered the study with her morning coffee, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Robert's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he set down the phone. "What's happened?" Sarah asked, setting down her cup and moving to his side. Robert explained the call, watching Sarah's face cycle through confusion, fear, and finally, fierce protectiveness. They had fought so hard to have a family, had opened their hearts completely to Emma, and now a stranger was threatening to tear apart everything they had built. "We have to tell her," Sarah said quietly. "Emma deserves to know the truth, but we also need to prepare her for the possibility that this woman might become part of her life. How do we explain to a 7-year-old that her perfect world might be changing again?" Robert asked. "She's just started to truly trust that we're permanent, that she's safe." Upstairs, Emma finished getting ready and bounded down to breakfast, her backpack slung over her shoulder, ready for another day at Riverside Elementary. She chatted excitedly about the art project she was working on and the upcoming field trip to the Natural History Museum. "Mom, Dad, you both look serious," Emma observed, her intuitive nature picking up on the tension immediately. "Is everything okay?" Robert and Sarah exchanged glances. They had always committed to honesty with Emma, age-appropriate but truthful. This would be their greatest test yet. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about something important," Sarah said gently, guiding Emma to the breakfast nook. "It's about your family, your biological family." Emma's face immediately clouded with worry. In her mind, discussions about her past usually meant changes were coming, and change had never been good in her experience. "Am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong?" Emma asked, her voice small and uncertain. "No, darling, you haven't done anything wrong," Robert assured her, kneeling beside her chair. Someone from your biological family, your biological grandmother, has been looking for you. She wants to meet you. Emma's world tilted. She had never imagined that anyone from her past was searching for her. In her mind, she had been unwanted, abandoned, forgotten. The idea that someone had been actively seeking her was both thrilling and terrifying. "Does this mean I have to leave you?" Emma whispered, the question that haunted every adopted child's deepest fears. "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly, taking Emma's hands in hers. "You are our daughter, legally and forever. Nothing will change that. But this lady, your grandmother, she wants to know you, to be part of your life if you want that too." Emma sat quietly for a long moment, processing this earth-shattering information. Finally, she looked up at her parents with eyes that seemed older than her 7 years. "Can I think about it?" Emma asked. "And will you help me decide what's best?" "Of course," Robert said, relief flooding through him. "We'll face this together, as a family, just like we face everything else." As they drove to school that morning, Emma was unusually quiet, staring out the window at the familiar streets of their neighborhood. Her perfect life suddenly felt fragile, like a soap bubble that might burst at any moment, but she was no longer the frightened foster child who had arrived at the Madison home. She was Emma Rose Madison, beloved daughter of Robert and Sarah, and she had learned that love could be strong enough to weather any storm. The question was, would this new revelation strengthen their family bonds or introduce complications that would test them all beyond their limits? 3 days had passed since the phone call that changed everything, and Emma had barely written in her journal. The leather-bound book that had been her constant companion now lay closed on her desk, as if opening it might make the scary new reality more real. Margaret Rose Thompson arrived on Friday afternoon in a silver sedan, her hands shaking as she rang the Madison's doorbell. Through the window, she could see the sprawling lawn, the immaculate rose garden, and the evidence of the privileged life her granddaughter was living. Emma watched from her bedroom window as the older woman emerged from the car. Margaret was tall and elegant, with silver hair styled in a neat bob and clothes that spoke of refinement and taste. But what struck Emma most was how much Margaret's eyes looked like her own, the same deep blue that Emma saw in the mirror every morning. "She looks like you, sweetheart," Sarah observed, standing beside Emma at the window. "Do you see the resemblance?" Emma nodded, unable to speak. The physical similarity was undeniable and somehow made this stranger feel both more real and more threatening. This wasn't just someone claiming to be family, this was someone who clearly shared Emma's DNA. The meeting had been carefully orchestrated by the family's attorney and a child psychologist. Emma would meet Margaret in the Madisons' living room, with Robert and Sarah present, for exactly 1 hour. No pressure, no decisions required, just an introduction to let Emma form her own impressions. "Remember what we discussed," Robert said gently as they prepared to go downstairs. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. This is entirely your choice." Emma took a deep breath and walked down the familiar staircase, her hand trailing along the banister that had become such a comfort to her. Margaret was sitting on the edge of the cream-colored sofa, looking as nervous as Emma felt. "Hello, Emma," Margaret said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're even more beautiful than I imagined." Emma studied this woman who claimed to be her grandmother. Margaret's eyes were filled with tears, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked kind but sad, like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for a very long time. "You look like me," Emma said finally, the first word she had spoken to any member of her biological family. "You look like your mother," Margaret replied. "My daughter Rebecca. She would have been so proud of the young lady you've become." The past tense wasn't lost on Emma. "Is my real mom dead?" Margaret nodded, wiping away a tear. "She died in a car accident when you were 3. Your father, he wasn't able to take care of you properly after that. I didn't even know you existed until last year, when I was going through Rebecca's belongings and found pictures of you." Emma absorbed this information quietly. She had no memory of her biological parents, but learning about her mother's death stirred something deep inside her. Not grief exactly, but a sense of loss for a woman she had never really known. "Why didn't you find me sooner?" Emma asked, her 7-year-old directness cutting through the adult complications. "I tried, sweetheart. I hired private investigators, contacted agencies, spent every penny I had searching for you. The system is complicated, and your father moved you around a lot before you entered foster care. I never stopped looking." Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo album. "These are pictures of your mother when she was your age. And here are photos of your grandfather, my husband who passed away 5 years ago. He would have loved to meet you." Emma looked through the photos, seeing her own features reflected in the face of a woman she couldn't remember. There were pictures of birthday parties, family vacations, Christmas mornings, evidence of a family that had loved her mother, and by extension would have loved her. "Mr. and Mrs. Madison," Margaret said, turning to Robert and Sarah, "I want you to know that I'm not here to disrupt Emma's life. I can see how much you love her, how well you've cared for her. I'm not seeking custody. I just want to be part of her life if she'll have me." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and confusion. She had been prepared for a battle, for someone trying to take Emma away. Instead, she was faced with a grieving grandmother who simply wanted to know her only grandchild. "What does that mean exactly?" Robert asked, his protective instincts still on high alert. "I'd like to visit occasionally, maybe have Emma spend a weekend with me now, and then if she's comfortable with that. I want to tell her stories about her mother, show her where she came from, but I understand that you are her parents now, and I respect that completely." Emma looked back and forth between the adults who were discussing her future. For months, she had felt completely secure in her place with the Madisons. Now suddenly, her world had expanded to include this stranger who shared her blood. "Can I think about it?" Emma asked, echoing the same request she had made when she first learned about Margaret's existence. "Of course, darling," Margaret said. "Take all the time you need. I've waited this long to find you. I can wait a little longer for you to decide if you want to know me." After Margaret left, Emma sat in the garden among Sarah's roses, her mind swirling with questions and emotions she couldn't quite identify. She wasn't the same frightened child who had been passed from home to home. She was Emma Madison, and she had parents who loved her unconditionally, but she was also someone else, Rebecca Thompson's daughter, Margaret's granddaughter. For the first time in her life, she had a connection to her origins, answers to questions she had been afraid to ask. That night she finally opened her journal again, her purple pen poised over the blank page as she tried to make sense of the day that had changed everything once more. "Dear Diary," Emma wrote that evening, her handwriting more careful than usual as she processed the day's momentous events. "Today I met my real grandmother, and I don't know how I feel about it. Her name is Margaret Rose Thompson, and my middle name comes from her. She seems nice, but I'm scared about what this means for me and Mom and Dad." Emma paused, looking out her window at the garden where she had spent the afternoon thinking. The roses were dormant now in the December cold, but Sarah had promised they would bloom again in spring. Just like Emma's life seemed to go through seasons of change and growth. "Margaret showed me pictures of my birth mother, Rebecca. She looked just like me when she was little, with the same blonde hair and blue eyes. It was weird seeing someone who was supposed to be my family but felt like a stranger. Mum and Dad let me keep one of the pictures to put in my special photo album." Robert and Sarah had handled the situation with remarkable grace, Emma thought. Instead of making her feel torn between families, they had encouraged her to explore this new relationship while reassuring her that nothing would change at home. "I asked Margaret why my birth father gave me up, and she said he was very young and scared after my birth mother died. She said he thought I would have a better life with other people, and she thinks he was right, because look how happy I am with Mom and Dad." This explanation had provided Emma with a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. The idea that her birth father had made a difficult decision out of love rather than abandonment helped heal a wound she had carried unconsciously for years. Margaret lives in a big house in Massachusetts with a piano and a library full of books. She said if I want to visit her sometime, she would teach me to play piano and show me all the places where my birth mother grew up. Part of me wants to see those places, but part of me is scared that if I go there, I might not want to come back here. Emma's fear was understandable, though perhaps unnecessary. She was beginning to learn that love wasn't a finite resource. Caring about Margaret didn't mean she loved Robert and Sarah any less. At dinner tonight, Mom and Dad asked me what I was thinking about Margaret. I told them I was confused because I don't remember my birth mother at all, but seeing Margaret made me feel connected to something I didn't know I was missing. Dad said it was okay to feel confused and that we could take as much time as I needed to figure things out. The conversation at dinner had been carefully managed by Robert and Sarah, who were determined not to let their own fears influence Emma's decision-making process. They wanted what was best for Emma, even if it meant sharing her with someone else. I asked Margaret if she was angry that I call Mom and Dad my parents now. She said she wasn't angry at all. She was grateful that I had found people who love me so much. She said she just wants to be my grandmother, not replace anyone. That made me feel better. Margaret's gracious approach had been crucial in making Emma feel safe about exploring this new relationship. By positioning herself as an addition to Emma's family rather than a replacement, she had removed much of the threat Emma initially felt. Jessica's mom asked me about the lady who came to visit today. Jessica saw the car when she was walking her dog. I told her it was my biological grandmother and that I might visit her sometimes. Jessica said that was cool because it meant I had even more people who loved me. I never thought about it that way before. Emma's friend's innocent observation had been profound in its simplicity. From a child's perspective, more love was always better, regardless of its source. I'm going to ask Mom and Dad if Margaret can come to my Christmas program at school next week. I think she would like to see me sing with the choir, and I want her to meet Mrs. Patterson and see how good I am at school now. This decision represented a major breakthrough for Emma. By wanting to include Margaret in her current life, rather than seeing her as separate from it, Emma was beginning to integrate her two family identities. Mom helped me write a letter to Margaret tonight. I told her that I would like to get to know her better, but that I need her to understand that Robert and Sarah are my real parents now and always will be. Mom said I could invite Margaret for Christmas dinner if I wanted to. The invitation to Christmas dinner would be significant, the ultimate test of whether these two parts of Emma's life could coexist peacefully. Sarah's suggestion showed remarkable maturity and generosity of spirit. I think I'm ready to learn about where I came from, as long as it doesn't change where I'm going. Mom and Dad promised me that nothing would ever change how much they love me or the fact that I'm their daughter forever. I believe them because they've never broken a promise to me. Emma was beginning to understand that identity wasn't about choosing one family or another. It was about integrating all the parts of herself into one complete person. Sometimes I think about the Emma who lived in foster homes and how scared she was all the time. That Emma would have been terrified of Margaret because change always meant losing something good. But this Emma, the one who has a real family and a safe home, this Emma can be brave enough to let more love into her life. Emma closed her journal and prepared for bed, feeling more settled than she had in days. Tomorrow, she would call Margaret and formally invite her to Christmas dinner. It would be the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one where she could honor her past while embracing her future. As Sarah came in for their nightly story time, Emma realized that her perfect life hadn't been threatened by Margaret's arrival. Instead, it had simply become bigger, more complex, and ultimately richer. She was still Emma Rose Madison, beloved daughter of Robert and Sarah, but now she was also the granddaughter of Margaret Thompson, inheritor of her birth mother's memory. For the first time since Margaret's phone call, Emma fell asleep, feeling excited about what tomorrow might bring. Christmas morning arrived with a gentle snowfall that made the Madison house look like something from a fairy tale. Emma woke early, not from excitement about presents, but from the nervous anticipation of the day ahead. Margaret would be joining them for Christmas dinner, the first time Emma's biological family and adoptive family would celebrate together. Dear Diary, Emma wrote before breakfast, sitting in her window seat and watching the snow dust the garden. Today is going to be the most important day of my life since the day Mom and Dad adopted me. Margaret is coming for Christmas dinner, and I'm scared and excited at the same time. Downstairs, Sarah was already in the kitchen, preparing the elaborate Christmas feast she had planned. She had insisted on cooking Margaret's favorite dishes, information she had carefully gathered during their phone conversations over the past 2 weeks. Robert was setting up the dining room, adding an extra place setting to their family table. "Are you nervous, sweetheart?" Sarah asked when Emma appeared in the kitchen, still in her Christmas pajamas. "A little," Emma admitted. "What if it's weird having her here? What if she doesn't like how we do Christmas?" Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, flour dusting her apron. "Emma, love, there's no wrong way to do Christmas when it's done with people who care about you. Margaret just wants to be part of your life. She's not here to judge or change anything." Margaret arrived at noon, carrying carefully wrapped presents and a nervous smile. She had spent weeks agonizing over the gifts, wanting them to be perfect for a granddaughter she was still getting to know. For Emma, she had brought a music box that had belonged to Emma's birth mother, along with a collection of children's books that Rebecca had loved as a child. The morning passed more smoothly than anyone had dared hope. Margaret fit naturally into their Christmas traditions, marveling at Emma's stocking stuffers and laughing at Robert's attempts to assemble a complicated toy. She shared stories about Rebecca's childhood Christmases, painting pictures of a little girl who had loved snow days and hot chocolate just like Emma did. "Your mother always insisted on opening one present on Christmas Eve," Margaret told Emma as they sat by the fireplace. "Just one small one, usually a new book or a special ornament. She said it made Christmas last longer." "We do that too," Emma exclaimed. "Mom lets me open pajamas on Christmas Eve so I have something special to wear to bed." The convergence of traditions felt like a sign to Emma that somehow these two parts of her life were meant to connect. But the most significant moment came during Christmas dinner, when Robert stood to make a toast. Emma held her breath, wondering what her father would say about having Margaret at their table. "Today, our family grew larger," Robert began, raising his glass of sparkling cider. "We're grateful to Margaret for finding Emma, for sharing her stories with us, and for understanding that love multiplies rather than divides. To family, in all its beautiful form." Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she raised her glass. "To Robert and Sarah for loving my granddaughter so completely, and for being generous enough to share her with me, and to Emma for being brave enough to let me into her wonderful life." Emma looked around the table at the 3 adults who loved her in different but equally real ways. This was what belonging felt like, not having to choose between parts of herself, but being accepted and celebrated as a whole person with a complex history. After dinner, Margaret asked if she could see Emma's room. As they climbed the stairs together, Emma felt proud to show off her sanctuary, the books, the journal, the photos documenting her life as a Madison. "This is where I write about everything that happens to me," Emma said, showing Margaret her leather journal. "Mom and Dad gave it to me when I first got here." Margaret picked up a photo from Emma's dresser, the formal family portrait they had taken just last month. Robert, Sarah, and Emma were posed in front of the fireplace, all 3 of them glowing with happiness and contentment. "You look so loved," Margaret said softly, "so confident and secure. This is exactly what Rebecca would have wanted for you." "Do you think she would be happy about you being here today?" Emma asked. "I think she would be grateful beyond words that you found parents who love you the way she would have," Margaret replied. "And I think she would be proud of the brave, kind little girl you've become." That evening, as Margaret prepared to drive back to Massachusetts, she made a promise that would shape Emma's future in ways none of them could yet imagine. "Emma, I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere," Margaret said, kneeling down to hug her granddaughter goodbye. I'll visit when you want me to, call when you need me, and always be here if you have questions about your mother or where you came from. But Robert and Sarah are your parents, and this is your home. I'm just grateful to be part of your story." Emma hugged Margaret tightly, breathing in her grandmother's familiar perfume. "Will you teach me to play piano when I visit you?" "I would love that more than anything," Margaret said. "And I'll tell you more stories about your mother and show you her room that I've kept exactly the way she left it." As Margaret's car disappeared into the snowy evening, Emma stood between Robert and Sarah on their front porch, feeling more complete than she ever had before. She wasn't just Emma Madison, beloved adopted daughter. She wasn't just Rebecca Thompson's biological child. She was both, and somehow, miraculously, that made her more herself than ever. "Are you happy about today?" Sarah asked as they went back inside. "I think so," Emma said thoughtfully. "It feels right, having Margaret know about my life here, like all the pieces of me finally fit together." That night, Emma wrote the longest journal entry of her life, documenting every detail of the Christmas that had united her past and present. She was no longer a child caught between two worlds. She was a little girl blessed with multiple sources of love, each making her stronger and more secure. But what Emma didn't know was that Margaret's presence in her life would soon reveal a secret that would test every relationship she had built, forcing her to make choices that would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone she loved. January brought unexpected developments that no one could have anticipated. Margaret had been visiting every other weekend, and Emma had spent one magical weekend in Massachusetts, learning to play simple melodies on Margaret's grand piano and exploring her birth mother's childhood bedroom, which Margaret had preserved like a shrine. It was during Emma's second visit to Massachusetts that Margaret made a discovery that would change everything. While showing Emma through Rebecca's belongings, she found a sealed letter tucked inside an old jewelry box, a letter addressed to "My daughter's future family" in Rebecca's handwriting. Margaret's hands trembled as she opened the letter, with Emma sitting beside her on Rebecca's bed. The contents were shocking. Rebecca had apparently hidden a substantial trust fund that she had established for Emma before her death. The fund, now worth over $2 million, had been forgotten in the chaos following Rebecca's accident. "Emma, sweetheart," Margaret said, her voice shaking, "your birth mother left you something very important. She saved money for your future, enough money to pay for college, to buy a house someday, to make sure you never have to worry about anything." Emma, now 8 years old and more mature than her years suggested, absorbed this information with surprising calm. "Does this mean I'm rich?" "It means your mother loved you very much and wanted to make sure you would always be taken care of," Margaret explained. "But Emma, we need to tell Robert and Sarah about this right away." The drive back to Connecticut was tense. Margaret knew this discovery would complicate everything. The Madisons were wealthy in their own right, but $2 million was still a significant sum. More importantly, the existence of the trust fund raised legal questions about Emma's adoption that could potentially threaten everything they had built. When Margaret arrived at the Madison house with Emma and the letter, the family meeting that followed was unlike anything they had experienced. Robert read Rebecca's letter twice, his face growing more serious with each word. "This changes things," Robert said finally. "Not for us, but legally. If this trust fund existed when Emma was placed for adoption, it should have been disclosed. The fact that it wasn't could give someone grounds to challenge the adoption." Sarah's face went pale. "Who would challenge it?" "Rebecca's letter mentions other relatives, cousins, an uncle. If they learn about the money, they might claim they should have been contacted before Emma was placed for adoption," Robert explained. "Money has a way of making people remember family obligations they previously ignored." Emma listened to this conversation with growing anxiety. The security she had fought so hard to achieve suddenly felt fragile again. "Does this mean I might have to leave you?" "Absolutely not," Robert said firmly. "We'll fight anyone who tries to take you away from us. You're our daughter legally and forever, but we need to be prepared for complications." Margaret felt terrible guilt for bringing this problem into their lives. I should have looked through Rebecca's things more carefully before I contacted you. I had no idea about the money. You did exactly what any loving grandmother would do, Sarah assured her. You found your granddaughter and brought her the truth about her mother. We can't blame you for that. Over the next few days, Robert consulted with attorneys and discovered that Margaret's fears were well-founded. Rebecca's cousin, Thomas, who had shown no interest in Emma when she was placed for adoption, was suddenly very interested now that money was involved. He was threatening to challenge the adoption on the grounds that family members should have been notified about Emma's availability and her inheritance. The good news, Robert's attorney explained, is that Emma's adoption is final and she's been with you for over 8 months. The courts generally won't disrupt a stable placement unless there's evidence of fraud or misconduct. The bad news is that this could drag on for months and be emotionally traumatic for Emma. Emma's response to this crisis surprised everyone. Instead of retreating into the fearful shell she had inhabited before the adoption, she became fiercely protective of her family. At 8 years old, she possessed a wisdom and strength that had been forged in the crucible of her early experiences. "I don't want any money if it means leaving Mom and Dad," Emma declared at a family meeting. "Can't we just give it to Cousin Thomas so he'll leave us alone?" "Oh, sweetheart," Sarah said, pulling Emma close. "The money isn't the real issue. It's about some people thinking they know what's best for you better than you know yourself." But I do know what's best for me," Emma said with 8-year-old certainty. "This is my family. This is my home. I don't care about people I've never met who suddenly want me now that there's money involved." Emma's clarity helped strengthen everyone's resolve. Robert decided to take the most aggressive legal approach possible, while Margaret hired her own attorney to support the Madisons. They would present a united front against anyone who tried to disrupt Emma's life for financial gain. The battle lines were drawn, but Emma was no longer the frightened foster child who had arrived at the Madison house 8 months earlier. She was a confident little girl who knew exactly where she belonged and was prepared to fight for it. As Emma wrote in her journal that night, her handwriting bold and determined, "Some people think money is more important than love, but they're wrong. I have everything I need right here, and I'm not going to let strangers take it away from me. Mom and Dad chose me when I had nothing, and I'm going to choose them right back no matter what." The greatest test of the Madison family's bond was about to begin, but they would face it together, united by love that no amount of money could buy or legal challenge could break. The custody hearing took place on a grey February morning, exactly 9 months after Emma had become a Madison. The courtroom was intimidating, with its high ceilings and formal atmosphere, but Emma sat between Robert and Sarah with quiet confidence, her small hand firmly clasped in theirs. Thomas Caldwell, Rebecca's cousin, sat with his attorney across the room. He was a man in his 50s who had never shown any interest in Emma until learning about her inheritance. His claim was that family members should have been contacted before Emma was placed for adoption, and that he was prepared to provide her with a loving home. Judge Patricia Harrison had presided over countless custody cases, but she had rarely seen a child as poised as 8-year-old Emma Madison. When asked if she wanted to speak to the judge privately, Emma had requested that her entire family, including Margaret, be present for anything she had to say. "Your Honor," Emma said, standing up with remarkable composure for her age, "I know there are people who think they know what's best for me, but I'm the only one who really knows what's best for me." Judge Harrison smiled gently. "And what do you think is best for you, Emma?" "I think what's best for me is staying with my real family, Robert and Sarah Madison, who chose me when I was scared and had nothing, and Margaret Thompson, who found me because she loves me, not because of money." Emma's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Mr. Caldwell didn't want me when I was in foster care and needed a family. He only wants me now because my birth mother left me money. That's not what family means." The judge asked Emma about her life with the Madisons, and Emma's responses painted a picture of a child who was not only loved, but thriving. She talked about her friends at school, her improving grades, her journal writing, her relationship with Margaret, and the security of knowing she was wanted exactly as she was. "Do you understand what an inheritance is, Emma?" Judge Harrison asked. "Yes, Your Honor. It's money my birth mother saved for me. But she saved it because she loved me and wanted me to be happy. She would want me to stay with the family that makes me happy, not go to strangers who just want her money." Margaret was called to testify next, and her words carried special weight as the biological grandmother who had initiated this entire situation. "Your Honor, I found my granddaughter because I wanted to honor my daughter's memory by making sure Emma was loved and cared for. When I discovered that Emma was not only loved but flourishing with the Madisons, I knew my daughter's wishes had been fulfilled. Mr. Caldwell has had 8 years to express interest in Emma's welfare." His sudden concern, coinciding with the discovery of her inheritance, is not coincidental. Robert and Sarah testified about their journey to parenthood, their decision to adopt, and the careful process they had undergone to ensure they could provide Emma with everything she needed. Their love for Emma was evident in every word they spoke. The most damning testimony came when Thomas Caldwell took the stand. Under cross-examination, he admitted that he had been aware Emma was in foster care, but had made no effort to contact social services or offer assistance. He also admitted that his interest in gaining custody had only emerged after learning about the trust fund. "Mr. Caldwell?" Robert's attorney asked. "What is Emma's favorite color?" I'm not sure. "What school does she attend?" "I don't know specifically." "What are her hobbies, her friends' names, her favorite foods?" Thomas Caldwell couldn't answer any of these questions, making it clear that his interest in Emma was purely financial. Judge Harrison recessed for lunch, during which Emma sat with her family in a nearby park, feeding ducks and talking about everything except the hearing. Her calmness amazed the adults around her. "Aren't you worried, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. "No," Emma said simply. "Judge Harrison is smart. She can see that you're my real family and that Mr. Caldwell just wants money. I trust her to make the right decision." When court reconvened, Judge Harrison's ruling was swift and decisive. "This case represents exactly what our adoption system is designed to prevent," she began. "Emma Madison was a child in need of a family. Robert and Sarah Madison provided that family, following all legal procedures and requirements. The fact that certain relatives failed to step forward when Emma needed them most does not give them the right to disrupt her life now that it's convenient for them." The judge continued, "Emma's inheritance will be held in trust until she reaches 18, managed by a court-appointed trustee with input from her adoptive parents. Mr. Caldwell's petition for custody is denied. Emma will remain with the Madison family, where she clearly belongs." Emma burst into tears of relief and joy, throwing her arms around both Robert and Sarah. Margaret wiped away tears of her own, grateful that her quest to find her granddaughter had led to this moment of affirmed family bonds rather than their destruction. Outside the courthouse, Emma made a decision that surprised everyone. She asked to speak to Thomas Caldwell before he left. "Mr. Caldwell," she said with 8-year-old directness, "I'm sorry you don't understand what family really means. If you ever want to learn, my real family would probably teach you. But you can't have my money, and you can't have me." 6 months later, Emma wrote her final entry in the journal that had chronicled her transformation from frightened foster child to confident daughter. "Dear Diary, today I realized I don't need to write in you as much anymore because I'm not scared about my life changing. I know exactly who I am. Emma Rose Madison, daughter of Robert and Sarah, granddaughter of Margaret, friend to Jessica and Marcus, student at Riverside Elementary, and the luckiest girl in the world. I learned that family isn't about blood or money. It's about choosing each other every single day. Mom and Dad chose me when I had nothing to offer but problems. Margaret chose me even though she could have stayed safely in her quiet life, and I choose them right back. Every morning when I wake up in my beautiful room, and every night when they tuck me in. Some people think money makes you rich, but they're wrong. Love makes you rich, and I'm the richest girl in the world. Tomorrow I start 3rd grade, and Margaret is teaching me a new piano piece, and Mom is planning a garden party for my 9th birthday next month. I have so many wonderful things to look forward to, and I'm not afraid anymore. I used to write in this journal because I needed somewhere safe to put my feelings. Now I write because I want to remember every detail of this beautiful life I get to live. I want to remember being chosen, being loved, being exactly where I belong. The scared little girl who started writing in this journal is gone. In her place is Emma Rose Madison, daughter, granddaughter, friend, student, and the happiest girl who ever lived. I think that's the best ending to any story.